Le Pavane, the city's most exclusive restaurant, shimmered under chandeliers shaped like frozen stars. Every table glowed with crystal glassware and hushed power, yet one corner sat heavy with silence. Billionaire Richard Hale, 48, a tech titan with piercing blue eyes and salt-flecked blonde hair, sat alone in a tailored charcoal suit. His plate held untouched filet mignon, steam curling into air he never breathed deeply. Across from him, an empty chair cut sharper than any knife. A decade had passed since his wife and young son were killed on a rain-slick highway, yet the echo of their absence stayed louder than the piano's soft notes. Wealth draped him like armor, but beneath the Armani and platinum watch, there was only hollowness. Tonight was no different, until a single voice shattered the velvet stillness and turned his world on its axis. The hum of whispers stilled as a girl barely 19 approached his table. Erin Brooks, pale from exhaustion, hair the color of straw tucked in a messy bun, clutched a baby wrapped in a faded blanket. Her coat was too thin, her sneakers worn to threads. She held herself with a quiet dignity despite trembling hands. She glanced at Richard's untouched steak and potatoes and asked softly, "May I have your leftovers, sir?" The words fell like a stone into water. Ripples of disbelief spread through the restaurant. Patrons craned their necks, some with smirks of mockery. A waiter moved swiftly to remove her, but Richard's raised hand froze him in place. Erin's eyes never begged, they only burned with a mother's desperate resolve for the small boy pressed against her chest. In that instant, Richard's silence broke, not in words, but in the thunder of his heart. Every corner of the room seemed to lean closer, soaking in the scandal. White-gloved hands covered whispering mouths, crystal goblets paused mid-air, and the wealthy elite sharpened their stares into knives. The maitre d' stiffened, prepared to usher Erin into the cold street, but Richard's firm gesture rooted him. The chandelier light cast a halo on Erin's tired face, and in her arms, Liam stirred, a baby of about 7 months, cheeks flushed with hunger, wide blue eyes fixed on the food. She didn't look around at the stairs. She kept her gaze locked on Richard, steady as stone. The silence stretched until Richard nudged the plate forward across linen white as snow. The room gasped, scandalized. But Erin did not snatch or beg. She reached slowly, her every motion deliberate, as if touching something sacred. Judgment swirled around them, but inside that circle of candlelight, only 2 worlds remained. Erin pulled a clean, frayed cloth from her bag, wrapped the food carefully, then knelt with quiet grace. From her pocket came a small plastic spoon. She blew gently on a portion of mashed potatoes, then fed Liam, whose tiny lips parted instinctively. The baby cooed, releasing a sound so pure it cracked something deep in Richard's chest. Liam's chubby hands patted Erin's coat as he swallowed each spoonful with joy, eyes glimmering in candlelight. Richard's grip tightened on his wineglass. The memory of his own son's laughter, 10 years gone, echoed so vividly it blurred his vision. Erin fed Liam slowly, reverently, ignoring the stares of wealth around her. There was no begging, no shame, only love in its most primal form. For Richard, that spoonful was louder than the orchestra, sharper than the whispers. Something shifted. Something old and buried inside him stirred back to life.
When Liam's belly was full, Erin rose, tucking the wrapped food into her satchel with careful hands. She nodded at Richard. Not thanks, but acknowledgement, like 2 strangers who understood something unspoken. Then she turned, weaving silently through the rows of tables toward the doors. The room's disapproval clung to her back, but she carried her son like a shield against the world. Richard sat frozen, staring at the place she had stood, as if the air itself held her imprint. The wine glass before him sat untouched, the steak cooling to gray. At last, without a word, he placed his napkin beside the plate and rose. The waiter's eyes widened in disbelief as Richard Hale, Billionaire, walked out into the velvet night. He didn't know why his feet moved, only that something greater than curiosity pulled him after her, into the autumn dark. Outside, city lights flickered in mist as Richard trailed Erin down a narrow alley. She clutched Liam tightly, checking shadows before stepping into a cracked parking lot. There, among rusted husks, sat a dented Navy sedan, its windows fogged, its back seat piled with thin blankets. It was not transportation, but home. Erin eased inside, settling Liam on the makeshift bedding. Her voice trembled as she sang, "You are my sunshine," soft and steady, rocking him against her chest. Richard froze in the shadows, struck by the sight of a baby soothed not by toys or comfort, but by the fierce love of a mother inside a broken car. It was harsher than any boardroom truth he'd faced. A woman surviving on scraps, mocked by his own world, yet radiant in devotion. He saw his emptiness mirrored, but her strength glowed like a quiet flame in the dark.
Richard stepped forward, startling Erin, who looked up, wary and unflinching. He offered money, a hotel, security, anything. She shook her head, calm but firm. "No, I'm not asking for charity. Just one day, safe, warm, and full for my son." Her words stung sharper than rejection. She wanted nothing from him but the chance for Liam to breathe freely. Richard retreated, humbled, his own wealth suddenly foreign in his hands. Erin hummed softly, rocking Liam back into slumber, her presence a quiet fortress against despair. Richard turned back toward the glowing city towers, each one a monument to his power, yet all meaningless compared to the fragile love in that car. For the first time in years, he walked away unsettled, not by loss, but by the spark of something he thought he no longer possessed, the need to care. Before dawn, Richard returned silently. At the edge of the sedan, he left a package: baby formula, diapers, and a sealed container of warm soup. No notes, no signature, just survival. Days passed, and each morning new parcels appeared: tiny onesies, jars of fruit puree, a soft blanket. Erin noticed, but never searched for the giver. Her suspicions slowly melted into fragile hope. She learned trust again, not because promises were spoken, but because quiet actions kept arriving, steady as sunrise. Richard never approached. He only watched from a distance, his heart shifting with every sight of Liam smiling brighter. For a man who had built empires from control, this silent giving became his first act of surrender. He realized he wasn't saving them, they were saving him, one unseen kindness at a time. And yet, he knew fate would soon test this fragile thread of hope.
Autumn deepened, and one night Liam's soft whimpers grew into cries. His skin burned hot, his breath short. Erin rushed to the emergency room, frantic. At the intake desk, the receptionist barely looked up. "Insurance?" Erin shook her head, desperate. The woman's face hardened. "We're full. You'll have to wait." Erin pleaded, voice breaking. But the clerk turned away. She sank into a plastic chair, rocking Liam as his tiny chest struggled against fever. The fluorescent lights flickered harshly, casting her tears in cold white. In that sterile waiting room, the line between wealth and poverty grew into a wall. Around her, others were seen. But she, too poor, too unseen, was left to pray. In her arms, Liam whimpered, weaker, quieter. Erin's heart shattered with helplessness. She whispered to him, but the walls only answered with silence and the hum of indifference. Headlights swept the curb as Richard's car screeched to a halt. He stormed through the ER doors, coat flaring, eyes burning with urgency. Without hesitation, he lifted Liam from Aaron's arms, his voice steel and fire. "A doctor, now." The room froze. Nurses rushed forward, swept the child into care, monitors humming within seconds. Richard stood over Aaron, silent but unshakable, while order replaced dismissal. Within the hour, Liam's fever broke into steady breaths, his tiny chest rising with calm. Aaron exhaled for the first time all night, tears slipping unchecked down her pale cheeks. She glanced at Richard, not just with gratitude, but with recognition of something deeper. He had not just cut through hospital bureaucracy, he had stepped into her battle as if it were his own. For the first time in years, Richard Hale felt alive in saving someone again.
It began with a single photo. Richard Hale exiting the emergency room with Liam in his arms and Aaron walking close behind. The blurry shot, taken by a bystander's phone, spread across social media within hours. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire with mystery young mother and baby." Blogs speculated, tabloids spun tales of scandal. Was Aaron a gold digger? Was Richard hiding a secret family? The online cruelty was swift, mocking her worn shoes, her age, her presence beside a billionaire. Aaron, in the modest apartment Richard quietly arranged, scrolled through hateful comments until her chest tightened with shame. She shut off the screen, clutching Liam's hand to steady herself. But the damage was done. Her past loneliness felt safer than this public judgment. For the first time, she thought of running, not from hunger, but from a world too eager to tear her apart. The apartment Richard secured was modest by his standards. Sunlit, clean, with soft gray walls and 2 small bedrooms. For Aaron, it was the first space in months not tainted by cold car seats or fear. Yet in its quiet, she felt the weight of eyes everywhere. The headlines followed her like shadows into every room, whispering doubts into every corner. Liam's laughter echoed off the walls, but Aaron sat on the couch, rigid, staring at her phone as venomous words replayed in her mind. Parasite. Trash in designer halls. He'll toss her away. Richard arrived to find her withdrawn, her posture closed, her gaze vacant. She whispered, "I can't do this. I won't let Liam grow up mocked." Richard's chest tightened, realizing the fire he had witnessed in her was dimming, not from hunger, but from the world's cruelty masquerading as curiosity. Richard sat quietly beside her, watching Liam reach for his mother with innocent joy, untouched by judgment. Aaron's words haunted him. "I won't let him grow up mocked." He realized silence would mean surrender. For years, Richard had hidden from the public, retreating into sterile boardrooms and guarded penthouses. Now he understood, his voice could shield them. That evening, he called his publicist with a decision. No polished press release, no controlled narrative. He wanted to speak plainly, publicly, about who Aaron was and why she mattered. His team tried to dissuade him, warning of reputational risks, shareholder doubts, investor panic. Richard's reply was steady. "My reputation can burn, but she and her son deserve light." For the first time in a decade, Richard Hale chose to walk into the fire willingly, not to defend himself, but to defend them. The studio lights burned soft gold against the billionaire's face as Richard sat down for a live interview. There were no theatrics, no staged smiles. He spoke plainly, beginning not with Aaron, but with the tragedy that hollowed him. He recounted the night his wife and son were killed, the silence that followed, and how he buried himself in empire and wealth that meant nothing. His voice cracked as he admitted, "I stopped living the day they died." Then he spoke of Aaron. He described a girl who asked not for charity, but for scraps to feed her baby. A girl who woke in him something he thought was lost forever. "She didn't take from me. She gave me back the will to care." His words, raw and unscripted, cut deeper than headlines. For the first time in years, the billionaire bared his heart.
The morning after the broadcast, the tide shifted. Social media that once mocked Erin now defended her. Mothers across the country flooded comment sections with their own stories of poverty and survival. Nurses explained how girls like Erin slipped through cracks of a system built to ignore them. Donations poured into shelters and community kitchens. A mother in Kansas started a fund for single mothers. Within days, it surpassed $50,000. Erin watched the wave unfold silently from her apartment, Liam crawling at her feet, unaware of the storm beyond the walls. For once, she felt seen, not as a caricature, but as a mother. Richard's words had done more than shield her. They had flipped the narrative, turning cruelty into compassion. Yet even in this new light, Erin carried the fear of losing it all again, as quickly as it had come. 3 nights later, Erin stood outside Richard's townhouse, Liam bundled against the evening chill. She didn't knock. Richard opened the door before she could, as if he had been waiting. Erin's eyes were tired but steady. "If you still want us, we're here," she said simply. Richard stepped aside, heart swelling as mother and child crossed his threshold. The moment was quiet but profound, an unspoken agreement that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The home, once cold and museum-like, filled instantly with life. Liam's small toys scattered across pristine rugs. Erin's laughter, cautious at first, began to echo through the marble halls. Richard realized that for the first time in a decade, he did not return to an empty chair. He returned to family, fragile but real, woven together by survival, courage, and a love neither had expected.
Days fell into a rhythm. Richard brought groceries in the mornings, learning how to make scrambled eggs the way Liam liked them. He clumsily changed diapers until practice turned into confidence. He memorized the sound of Liam's cries, distinguishing hunger from discomfort. Erin, once guarded, softened as she watched him lean into fatherhood without hesitation. She had known men who vanished at the first burden, yet Richard stayed. He never asked for gratitude. He simply showed up, steady as sunrise. At night, when Liam finally slept, they shared coffee on the balcony, watching the city hum below. They didn't name what they were. They didn't need to. The connection between them grew not from passion, but from persistence. 2 broken souls binding their fractures into something new. In silence and small routines, the mansion of a billionaire began to feel like a home. One evening, Erin found a plain white envelope slipped under the apartment door. Inside was a letter in her mother's neat, sharp handwriting. "If there's still a chance to know my grandson, I would like to try." Erin froze, staring at the page as Liam babbled beside her. For 2 years, her parents had disowned her, ashamed of a daughter who carried a child out of wedlock. Now they wanted entry into Liam's life. When Richard returned that evening, he found her trembling, letter clenched in her hands. She whispered, "What do I do?" He told her gently, "You don't owe them anything, but Liam deserves the choice you never had." The words cut through her fear, planting a seed of courage. Erin realized this wasn't just about her parents. It was about breaking the cycle of abandonment for her son.
3 days later, Erin stood on her parents' gravel driveway, Liam in her arms and Richard beside her. The white farmhouse loomed with memories, both tender and painful. The door creaked open, and her mother stepped out, older now, eyes brimming with regret. Behind her, Erin's father stood stiff, his gaze fixed on the baby. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Liam reached a tiny hand toward his grandmother, who broke down in tears. "May I hold him?" she asked, voice trembling. Erin hesitated, then slowly placed Liam into her mother's arms. Years of anger cracked open under the weight of an infant's innocence. Her father's eyes softened, and soon Erin found herself enveloped in her mother's embrace. Forgiveness did not erase the past, but it began to write a new one. On that weathered porch, 3 generations exhaled together for the first time. Inside, the house smelled faintly of old wood and tea.
Erin sat at the same kitchen table where she had eaten cereal as a child, now watching her parents coo over Liam with awe. Richard lingered by the doorway, a quiet witness to the healing. For years, this house had symbolized rejection, but today it became the ground of forgiveness. Erin's mother poured tea with shaking hands, while her father bounced Liam gently on his knee, laughter breaking through years of silence. Erin caught Richard's gaze from across the room, mouthing, "Thank you." He shook his head, smiling back, whispering only to himself, "Thank you for going home." The kitchen light glowed warm, illuminating faces once hardened, now softened by love. For the first time in years, Erin felt not like a burden, but like a daughter again. And Liam, without knowing, had stitched them all together.
Months passed like gentle tides. Erin and Liam settled into Richard's world, not as guests, but as family. The apartment filled with drawings taped to the fridge, tiny socks on radiators, the soft hum of lullabies drifting through rooms once silent. Richard found himself thriving, not in boardrooms, but in bedtime stories and morning giggles. He no longer measured his days in profits, but in smiles. Erin, once a shadow of herself, blossomed with security, her laughter returning in ripples. Liam grew fast, his first steps greeted not by emptiness, but by cheering arms. The billionaire who had once drowned in loneliness now walked with purpose, hand in hand with a woman who taught him that survival is its own form of grace. Quietly, slowly, the broken pieces of 3 lives began shaping into something whole. It came unexpectedly, a wedding invitation from one of Richard's old business partners, a sprawling affair set under crystal chandeliers in Manhattan's grandest ballroom. Richard hesitated to attend, knowing the press would be relentless, but Erin urged him gently, "You can't hide forever." That night, Erin appeared at his side in a borrowed gown, her blonde hair cascading down her shoulders, Liam snug in the arms of a hired nanny. The room stilled when they entered. Whispers circled like smoke. "That's her. The girl from the photo." Richard ignored them, but Erin felt each stare like a blade. Then Richard did something bold. He took her hand, raised it, and kissed her knuckles in full view. A hush fell. It wasn't charity. It wasn't scandal. It was declaration. The mogul and the girl mocked as unworthy stood together, unshaken. The whispers turned to fire when tabloids caught wind of the ballroom display. The next morning, headlines exploded. From leftovers to love, Billionaire's scandal grows. Some praised the courage, others sneered at Erin. Paparazzi camped outside their home. Erin's fear returned, but Richard's resolve hardened. He arranged a press conference, not to defend himself, but to defend her. Cameras flashed as he stood with Erin at his side. Liam nestled between them. "She is not a story," Richard said firmly. "She is a mother, my partner, and this boy is my son in every way that matters." The room buzzed, questions hurled like stones, but Richard's voice was steady. He had built empires by outlasting storms. This time the storm was not business, it was love, and he would not let the world strip it from him. With every declaration came backlash. Investors called Richard reckless, accusing him of jeopardizing the company with sentiment. Friends whispered that he had lost his mind. A board member even suggested Erin sign a contract to protect assets. Richard threw the document back without reading. "She is not a liability," he said. Erin, overhearing, felt guilt claw at her. She had never wanted to cost him anything. That night, she packed a small bag, intending to slip away. But when she opened Liam's bedroom door, Richard was already there, kneeling by the crib, whispering a story about fireflies. Liam giggled, reaching out. Richard turned, eyes locking with Erin's. "If you leave, you take the only family I've had in 10 years. Her hands trembled. She dropped the bag, walked over and held him tightly. The storm outside roared, but inside, they clung harder.
Weeks later, Erin returned to her parents' home with Richard at her side.
Liam toddled on the porch, giggling as his grandparents bent low to scoop him into their arms. This time, there was no hesitation. Her mother embraced her daughter fully, whispering apologies too long delayed. Her father's stern face cracked into quiet tears as he held Liam. Around that kitchen table again, they laughed, not as fractured parts, but as family reforged. Aaron's parents admitted their shame had cost them years they would never reclaim. Aaron's forgiveness was not instant, but it was real, planted like a seed that would grow with time. Richard watched quietly, understanding this reconciliation was bigger than him. It was Aaron's healing. For the first time, she was not a runaway, not a cast-off. She was a daughter restored and a mother surrounded. One bright spring afternoon, they returned to the park where fate had first tied their lives together. The same park where Aaron once sang Liam to sleep inside a dented sedan. But now, instead of cold shadows, the field was alive with sunlight, a humble arch wrapped in ivy, and close friends gathered under an oak tree. Richard stood at the center, not in Armani, but in a soft gray blazer. Liam, now 2, toddled across the grass in a navy vest, clutching a velvet box. The boy's determination drew laughter, but when he reached Richard, he placed the box in his hand as if passing history itself. Richard knelt, eyes glistening. The same hands that once built empires now trembled, not for business, but for love. For the family he never thought he'd have again.
Richard turned toward Erin, who stood barefoot in a simple white dress, her hair glimmering in the golden light. For a moment, silence held the field. Then, Richard spoke. "You didn't beg, you didn't expect, you just wanted to feed your son. And in doing so, you gave me back my life." His voice cracked, but he continued, opening the small velvet box. "You didn't take my leftovers, Aaron. You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing. Family, love, a future." Tears slipped down Aaron's cheeks as he knelt fully. "Will you marry me?" The crowd stilled. Aaron dropped to her knees before him, laughter and tears spilling together. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling. Richard slipped the ring onto her hand, and Liam clapped his tiny palms, as if sealing their promise with joy. The minister's words flowed softly, as Richard and Aaron exchanged vows. They promised not perfection, but persistence, never to walk alone again. Mid-ceremony, Liam waddled forward, clutching Richard's leg with both arms. The boy looked up, eyes shining, and chirped a single word, "Daddy." The field fell silent. Richard bent, scooping the child into his arms. For years, his hands had held nothing but empty wealth. Now they held everything. With Liam on one side and Aaron on the other, he repeated the final vow. "I will love you, my family, with everything I have, for the rest of my days." It was not rehearsed, it was not polished, but it was truer than anything he had ever said.
As twilight painted the sky in gold and lavender, music floated under the oak tree. There was no chandelier, no marble ballroom, only grass beneath their feet and friends circling in laughter. Richard took Aaron's hand, pulling her close as they swayed slowly. Liam clapped from his grandmother's arms, giggling at the sight. Aaron whispered through tears, "We're home." Richard kissed her forehead, his heart lighter than it had been in a decade. For years he had built empires on steel and glass, but true wealth, he realized, was this: arms full, hearts whole, a family not bought, but born from survival and kindness. In the soft light, his grief finally loosened, replaced by something he once thought impossible: peace. The years of loss had carved Richard hollow, but now, under the branches of the oak tree, he was full again. Erin had not saved him with beauty or charm. She had saved him with dignity, resilience, and love. Liam, once fed with leftovers, now thrived on a father's devotion and a mother's courage. Their story had begun with hunger and whispers of shame, but it ended with unity and light. Richard did not see wealth on Erin's hand as she lifted it, ring gleaming in the sun. He saw family, chosen and earned, The billionaire who once drowned in emptiness now understood. Happiness was not measured in millions, but in moments. And with Aaron and Liam by his side, he finally had everything. Not perfect, not scripted, but real. And for the first time in years, it was more than enough.